our topic today because what we're talking about today will likely have the biggest impact on your sales results than anything you've ever heard in your life. In fact, I'm that certain. Now, I've been in the full-time sales profession for well over 3 decades, and I went from virtually no sales knowledge to becoming the world sales champion in my first job of selling fire and security systems. I was the #1 salesperson in the country for products that I sold in the pharmaceutical industry, and then I've run a sales organization for the past 29 years. What we're talking about is the 3 10s. In other words, your results as a sales professional will be directly impacted by how your prospects feel about these 3 elements on a scale of 1 to 10. How certain are they of these 3 things on a scale of 1 to 10? Number 1, your product, service, or idea. That is the customer seeing the value and effectiveness of your product or service. In other words, they love it. They need your product, they want your product, and are feeling a certain amount of pain that your product would relieve. So let's say that they were 100% certain your product was the greatest thing since sliced bread. They are convinced they need it, they want it. Are they going to buy it from you? In fact, you ask a room full of salespeople, even the experienced ones will raise their hands. And the answer is no, because they also must trust and connect with you. Okay? Trust and connect with you is number 2. Are you likable? Are you trustworthy? Are you a person who puts the customer's needs first? If any problems arise, you'll be right there to solve them. You don't come right out and say, you can trust me. Instead, you give evidence of why they can trust you. So say things like, if you have any questions after you become a client, George, please feel free to call me. I want to make sure to take care of you, and I want to be here for you. Then you make sure you do what you say. So that's number 2. Number 3 is, do they trust and connect with your company? That is why it's so important to have a core story about you and your company automatically built into your sales presentation every time you have a viable prospect. That is also why it is so much easier to sell prospects who have already bought from your company, because that just leaves them the first 2 things to contend with. So the key thing is you need to move them along the scale of certainty. Now, there are 2 kinds of certainty. There's logical certainty and there's emotional certainty. Let's talk about logical certainty. Those are the words you say. Does the case you make to the prospect add up on an intellectual level? The features and benefits and the long-term value proposition. Does the idea or thesis you presented make sense? Does it meet their needs? Is it priced fairly compared to the competition? And again, it's not just cost, but the value you get for the cost. So have you presented in a logical way where they can connect the dots from A to Z without finding holes in your story? And can they turn around and tell somebody else and convince them logically? Next is emotional certainty. Emotional certainty is painting the picture of the future to your prospect where they have already bought your product. They see themselves using the product and they feel good as a result of it. Now, when you do this, John, you'll sleep like a baby knowing you're secure financially for the rest of your life, for example. You can go on vacations, enjoy yourself in your life, and have your life back again. We call this technique future piercing. People buy on emotion and they justify their decision with logic. If you don't convince them emotionally, they'll say, let me do some research and get back to you. You cannot sell on emotion only, however, because humans are natural BS detectors and they will not usually get swept away by emotion alone if your proposal does not make sense. For example, you can say with excitement, give me $100,000 today and I'll give you $200,000 next week. Nobody in his or her right mind is going to give you the $100,000. But if you say, and as security, I will give you a $100,000 mortgage on my $2 million home with a certified appraiser of your choice and full title insurance, well, that logical explanation, once verified, could get the prospect off his wallet. So you need to convince them both logically and emotionally from the beginning to the end of your presentation. Now, it's not the job of the salesperson to turn no's into yeses. It's the job of the salesperson to turn "let me think about it" into a yes. And I'll call you back into a yes. And let me talk to my wife first into a yes. And it's a bad time of year into a yes. What do we call these statements? Objections. And they happen at the back end of your sales presentation after you've asked for the order. Now get this, and I really want you to get this. The actual meaning of the objection, however, has very little to do what it states on the surface. So objections are merely a smoke screen of uncertainty for one or all three of the 10s we just mentioned above. So if I ask for the order and the prospect is not high enough on the certainty scale on any one of the three 10s, they will throw up a smoke screen in the form of an objection. And they will do this instead of telling you which of the three 10s was holding them back. So they won't tell you, "I like you and your company, but I don't like your product." They won't tell you, "I like your product and your company, but I don't like you." And they won't tell you, "I like you and your product, but I don't like your company." So instead, they give you a little white lie to avoid a confrontation and give you a little hope that with just enough time, they will call you back and place an order. And to that end, they will often come out with a quick one-liner about how much they like your product. So they'll say something like, "It sounds pretty good, Bob, but I just need to speak with my wife first and I'll call you back later." And the amateur salesperson will take that at face value and really think he is going to be sitting there for hours thinking it over, talking with his wife, talking with his partner. So let's say they are out of 5. That does not mean you have a 50% chance of making the sale. It just means they are saying, "Convince me. I want you to convince me because I want to feel certain, and then I will buy." So let's say they're at a 3 or at a 7. It's the same thing. They are saying, "If you can convince me, you can get me to a 10. Now let's make something clear. We're not talking about high-pressure sales tactics here. We're talking about the salesperson taking charge of the conversation to ensure open and honest communication. Seeing an objection for what it really is, a smokescreen for one or more of the three 10s. So this means two things. Number one, during your presentation, you need to have built into your presentation the words and the feelings to build certainty for your product, yourself, and your company. And you're going to do this logically, and you're going to do this emotionally. And number two, when you hear an objection, you have to ask yourself and the prospect, how certain are you on the scale of 1 to 10 that what we are offering today will do what I say it will do? And how certain are you on a scale of 1 to 10 that you believe that I and my company will take care of you and we will do what we say we are going to do? Because that is what an objection smokescreen is really all about. And again, we need to do this both logically and emotionally. And it's your job as a sales professional to give them evidence and get them enthused so that they are certain about your product, service, or ideas. And second, don't just tell them they can trust and connect with you, but give them reasons why you will serve them after the sale and actually do it and be a warm and friendly person and a person of strength of character. And finally, don't just tell them they can trust your company, but tell them why. How many customers? How long has the company been in business? Evidence of satisfied customers, and which department will help them after the sale. Now, I want you to remember these things for the rest of your life, because getting your customer up to a level 10 in these three areas is likely to have a bigger impact on your paycheck than almost anything else you will learn in your sales career. Thank you.